My name's Ray Juncal, and I've been asked to talk a little bit about the work I did on a TV series called Quark. After I got out of art school, I started working for an architect here, a neighbor friend, John Jurdy. I did a little bit of everything for him, materials, displays, presentations, and I did some model work. Frank Gehry hired me to run his model shop, and then I went walkabout and sailed a big schooner down the coast of Central America. When I got back, I was looking for some work, and my friend John Jurdy said, "Hey, we got an architectural model. You want to build it for us?" And just like that, I was in the model business. I wound up with a 1,500 square foot shop doing mostly architectural models, some store planning and design, and some work for props and so forth for commercials and films. I got hooked up with graphic films, a small shop that did a lot of television and documentary work. They did NASA things and various stuff. And they asked me and a collaborator, John Lilly, to work on the Quark models for them. John Lilly was a big scale fabricator guy. I was a medium to small scale fabricator guy. We worked mostly with Bruce Block, who was kind of graphic films effects supervisor, jack of all trades, and Les Novros, who was the principal at the company. As we got started, graphic films provided us with some early storyboard concept stuff. I did some sketches of something that looked a little bit more like space hardware. It was a little bit easier to build with flat panels and facets and a round tube. As a result, in that process, I did some preliminary sketches and then did a working drawing, which we would have needed to actually fabricate the object. It turned out that concept was rejected, and they wanted to go with the more compound curve concept that was shown in the storyboard work. And I ultimately understood that was part of the humor of what Buck Henry was trying to achieve, kind of a Maxwell Smart kind of goofy look to it. And as a result, that's how we proceeded. Due to all the compound curves and just the general shape, we wound up sculpting that in foam, then doing a thin fiberglass and layup to get the finished shape. We worked on a positive mold and then took the foam out of the middle because we needed to put in structure and mechanicals and so forth. That's how we arrived at the shape we built, even though it was a more difficult build. That's what the client wanted. That's what the client got. We didn't have the budget for motion control stuff, so we relied on mechanical and electrical tricks to brighten this thing up. We built a clean 12-volt power system and a control panel with sliders that controlled the various motors and so forth. We had the standard light bulb box cabin lights. We had blinkies in the rear motor. In those days, we didn't have the LED stuff, so it was powering a little grain of wheat incandescent stuff on the top as kind of like a police cherry top effect, but it chased around in a circle. That was pretty nice. There was two spotlight kind of things, nostrils under the nose that would shine down on the bag capture sequence and add a little bit of a source light that they could augment with some external stuff when they were filming. The mechanical stuff we did was mostly 12-volt train motors because they run pretty smooth. The trick was the Bombay doors would open on a slider. The arms, which were kind of up like this when they were stowed, would come down and extend, and then the shoulder would track all the way forward to the forward end of the Bombay doors. At that point, there would be a cut, would have a wand puppet, Jim Henson moved the arms of the little puppets. And on the end of the wand was a syringe, kind of a squeezy thing that operated the claws. Then at that point, we unlocked the shoulder from the elbow, and the arms were free to rotate and could be operated by this wand puppet system. And we could puppeteer it into the mouth of the garbage collector. The mouth was also on a motor, and it went up and down on a slider from the control panel. It all was fed from a wire bundle that came up through the mounting stand in the belly of the thing. Pretty much simple stuff, but we thought it was really hot stuff back in the day. It was pretty good for not motion control like they were doing on Star Wars. We did a couple of other things for the Quark show. We did a Death Star Zardoz looking ship that was fairly simple. It looked like an African mask, if you ask me. It was this red floating in space object. Basically, simple model aside from the contours of the face. It was a light bulb in a box kind of a trick, pretty straightforward. We also modified a ship that Graphic Films had on hand from a previous documentary or something that they made that was actually built by Doug Trumbull. And I've heard that Dykstra worked on that ship also. What we did was simply take the existing tail off of the ship and put a different tail end on it that changed the look. The front part that was built by Trumbull was built on a slide projector, which was kind of funny. And the cassette for the slide projector sat on the top of the ship and would rotate. And then later that slide carousel was used separately, I think, as an object floating in space that was a space station or something. It was not a huge budget, so Graphic Films was trying to get as much mileage as possible, with the stuff they had on hand or that they could afford to just modify a little bit to make it work. There's a funny anecdote. When we presented the model with the control panel and everything to the principal there, Les Novros, and to Buck Henry, we had fixed it up so that there was a big pink tongue that when the mouth opened, this big pink tongue would come rolling out. And when we pulled that little trick off, Buck Henry thought it was funny. Of course, he's got an obscure sense of humor. And Les Novros was kind of... as I recall, but once Buck started laughing, everything was good. That's about all I have to say on the Quark thing, other than this was all done about 50 years ago, and I want to thank you for the past. It's been fun looking up, all of the stuff that I've hardly remembered and kind of refreshing my memory, and thank you for taking me on a trip through the past darkly in this case. That's it for now. That's all, folks.